Welcome to this Ask Firebase live hangout. Last year, after Google's developer conference I/O, we ran a live hangout about Android Marshmallow, which was one of the big announcements at I/O 2015. Last week, Google ran I/O 2016, and one of the biggest announcements there was Firebase. Firebase is a set of tools and infrastructure that you as a developer can use to improve your apps and build your business. As a matter of fact, I've used it quite a bit already to become a better dad. I'm working together with my son on a game that is using a lot of Firebase services, and it's been a great father-son bonding experience. But enough about me. Let's talk about you. You are one of about 4,000 developers tuning in from 68 different countries to watch today. Thank you for joining us. So with such an excellent audience, we made sure to get you an excellent panel. So on the panel here today, to answer your Firebase questions, we have, on my left, Ian Barber, a developer programs engineer working on Firebase here at Google. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you.
Next to Ian, we have Magnus Hyttsten, a Google developer advocate, also working on Firebase. Yep. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
And next to Magnus, we have James Tamplin, a Firebase co-founder, and now a Firebase product lead at Google. Welcome, James.
Thank you, Martin.
Can you believe it? 68 countries?
It's pretty incredible.
Pretty incredible, yeah. But the key participant in this event is you, because the panel here is here to answer your Firebase questions. And the way to ask those questions is to tweet or make a Google Plus post and use the hashtag AskFirebaseLive, and we will see it. We'll try to answer as many of your questions as we can today, and we may not get through all of them. And the ones we're not able to get through, we'll see if we can answer later on social media. Before we get into the questions, though, and I've looked at the list, and there are some really good questions in there, we are going to hear a short introduction about what Firebase is and how it can help you as a developer. And James is going to start us off on that. Over to you, James.
Thanks, Martin. So for those of you who watched Google I/O and some of the live streams, this is going to be a significantly abridged version of my overview of Firebase presentation. And the idea is to get those of you who haven't seen that or haven't got a good understanding of what Firebase is, a brief overview. So let's get started. So here at Google, we think that creating a successful app is still too hard. Developers like you are time and resource constrained, and having you spend time managing a dozen different services or building infrastructure that isn't in your core competency is a big distraction. And so we think this needs to be much simpler. So as Martin mentioned, I co-founded a startup called Firebase, which was a backend as a service. It helped power your app's backend with 3 different features: a real-time database, user authentication, and hosting. About 18 months ago, it joined Google, and we had 110,000 developers using Firebase. It's since grown to over 470,000 developers. And over the past 18 months, we've been working hard to turn it from more than just a backend as a service into Google's unified mobile platform. And so a week or 8 days ago at Google I/O, we announced a huge expansion to Firebase. So we moved from the existing backend services and we added tools to help you improve your app's quality. We added tools to help you grow your app, including acquiring and engaging users. And we added tools to help you earn money. But tying all this together, we added a full analytics product. So we went from these original 3 features, and now Firebase contains 15 features and integrations. But we're doing all of this while trying to stay true to the original principles that Firebase had. Firebase was known for its great developer experience, intuitive APIs, great documentation, and fantastic support. And we're continuing all of that. Firebase is cross-platform. It's not just a tool for Android. Whether you're building iOS, web, or Android apps, will help you. And finally, Firebase is an integrated suite of products. So we have one SDK, we have one console, we have one set of docs. And where it makes sense, data actually flows between our products to help you do more faster. So let's dive in. First, we'll talk about analytics, which really ties the whole platform together. So we've taken the decade plus of knowledge that Google has here on Google Analytics, and we've built Firebase Analytics from the ground up, and it's designed for apps. Instead of page views and sessions, we're event and user-centric. And there's a feature called Audience, which you can think of like user segments, that helps connect the different Firebase features, and I'll touch on those as we go through. And best of all, it's free and unlimited. So you can send an unlimited number of events to Firebase Analytics, completely free. So let's jump into the services that Firebase has to help you power your app's backend. So every app typically wants to have an understanding of who a user is so that they can provide a personalized experience. And so that's exactly what Firebase Auth does. We provide support for authentication with email and password, social providers like Facebook, Twitter, GitHub, Facebook, and Google. And we'll also tie into your existing auth system for maximum flexibility. And best of all, last week we announced that we have a brand new out-of-the-box UI repo that you can grab from GitHub. And you can take it and use it so that you get years of experience from Google and you don't have to reinvent the login flow. Auth also ties into our real-time database. Now, if you used Firebase before last week, this is the feature you're probably most used to. It's a cloud-hosted NoSQL JSON database. So you store the data as JSON, and when you write to Firebase database, it synchronizes it out to every other client who cares in milliseconds. And this lets you build rich, collaborative applications that your end users are really coming to expect. It's super easy to get started with. But oftentimes you don't want to store just structured JSON data. You want to store more than this. And this is actually one of our largest feature requests. And we heard you. And so we're announcing Firebase Storage. Now, Firebase Storage lets you store images, videos, audio files really easily. It also gracefully handles poor internet connectivity, and it's backed by Google Cloud Storage. So you can store massively large files, and you can also integrate directly with the GCS APIs. The final way to store file data in Firebase is Firebase Hosting. So it lets you serve static assets if you're building a web or a mobile web application. It's SSL by default, and last week we announced that you can now bring your own custom domain to Firebase Hosting completely for free. So the last backend service product I want to talk about is Remote Config. Now, Remote Config gives you server-side variables that you can modify, and they're pushed down to your app instantly, so you can change its behavior without having to do a completely new deploy to an app store or the Play Store. And so this lets you do things like tweak your checkout flow, or provide a different experience to your users in India or who are on a Samsung Galaxy S6. And so this is a really, really powerful feature, and we're really excited what you can do with it. So we've taken a look at the backend services. Now let's take a look at app quality. So when your app crashes, it really hurts your business and it gives your users a poor experience. And so we've got two features to help you. First is Test Lab. And we announced it at Google I/O 2015 as Cloud Test Lab. And we're moving it into Firebase as Test Lab for Android. And so what it lets you do is it lets you run your application on the most popular devices before you push your app out into the wild. And so it gives your users the best experience since we let you catch bugs before they ship. We'll give you reports, we'll give you screenshots, and we'll let you run robo-tests if you haven't written your own custom test suite. And if you have, we'll let you do that too. But if you haven't caught a bug before it ships, we have Firebase Crash Reporting. Firebase Crash Reporting lets you see crashes and their impact. We prioritize ones by frequency and severity. We let you drill down by device, by OS, by API version. And it's also integrated with Firebase Analytics. So you can tell if a specific cohort, like those on a particular device or those in a particular geography, are crashing more than others. Finally, I want to talk about how Firebase is integrated not just with features within Firebase, but with broader Google. So we've deeply integrated with Google Play, And we've done things like pass crash data like ANRs, or application not responding, through to Firebase crash reporting. And we're passing in-app purchase data through to Firebase Analytics. So you get a view of your app all in one place. Second, we've integrated with Google Cloud. Underneath the hood, Firebase accounts and Google Cloud accounts are one and the same. And that means you can easily attach Google Cloud products to your Firebase app, so that when you need the full breadth of a cloud platform, it's right there at your fingertips. So I've covered how you build your app. Let's turn it over to Magnus to see how you can grow and earn.
Thank you, James. Yeah, so building an app is just one part of the entire development cycle. You also want to be able to grow a business from the app that you develop. And in order to do that, we have the grow and the earn subsections of Firebase, where grow contains the user acquisition process and re-engaging users that you already have, that are already using your apps. And then earn, obviously you want to monetize and be able to build a business around your app. So let's start about looking at the grow part of this. So one important activity when you create an app is to be able to share content of your app with other people. So you may want to add the capability to send a link that others can click on and they get engaged and get into a particular piece of your app. So in this case, for example, engaging into Bingo Blast. The way that this traditionally has worked is that that link will bring you over to an app introduction page where you can select the App Store or the Google Play Store in order to install the app. The user clicks on one of these and then they're being brought to the installation page for their app. And once they've installed the app, they're being brought into the main page of the app. This is a very bad user experience. So therefore we introduced a capability called dynamic links. So dynamic links enables you to create a link that when the user clicks on it, dynamic links will check whether the app is installed already or not. If the app is not installed, dynamic links will reroute you to the appropriate App Store or Google Play property in order to install the app. And once the user opens up the app for the first time, the user will be brought to a specific piece of content that you have indicated in your app. And more than this, you can actually specify a specific state in the URL, the dynamic link URL, and that state can then create a very personalized context when they're being brought into the app. All right, so dynamic links is a single URL that brings the user through this entire flow to bring you to this particular content. It works across platforms, so it works on iOS as well as Android, and it preserves the URL state through the entire process. And of course, it's completely integrated with Firebase Analytics, so you can get lots of data around the engagement around these links. So moving over to Firebase Invites. So Firebase Invites allows users of your app to invite their friends to also engage with your app. So in this example, if they click on Send, for example, a list of their contacts will be displayed. They can select the friends that they want to invite to engage in the app, and a link can be sent out to these friends so that they can engage with the app. Firebase Invites contains a drop-in widget for the app sharing process. It supports both SMS as well as email invite messages to the people that wants to engage with your app. And it's built on dynamic links, so should their friends not have the app installed, it will automatically bring them through the app installation process. Another important component of user acquisition is the Google AdWords piece we have in Firebase. So Google AdWords is integrated in Firebase using the universal app campaigns. And what this is a technology that allows you to create ads for your app. And these ads can then be displayed on many different Google properties, such as Google Search, Google Play, YouTube, as well as the Google Display Network. And this allows you to reach billions of potential users and display your app in front of them. There is also relevant audience targeting. So using the Google data, we will find the users that makes the most sense to be able to display your app. And of course, it integrates with analytics, so you will get full conversion data and optimization data as part of this. What about re-engaging users? Well, we have a couple of technologies in this area, and one of them is Firebase App Indexing. Firebase App Indexing lets Google search, crawl your app for content, and then be able to display your app as part of a result page when users are using Google search. So you can see here, for example, on the left-hand side, we have a user searching for Kokari, and you can see a TripAdvisor actually showing up as a result to that query, because TripAdvisor apparently has data related to Kokari. And on the right-hand side, you can see somebody searching for hotels in Tokyo. And you can see the Expedia app as well as the Booking.com app showing up because they have relevant information related to hotels in Tokyo. If you've been developing apps, you may be aware of Google Cloud Messaging. And as part of Firebase, we're creating the next generation version of Google Cloud Messaging. And it's called Firebase Cloud Messaging. And as part of Firebase, we're also introducing one more notification feature, Firebase Notifications. Firebase Notifications is a simple user interface that lets you in a Firebase console enter notification information that you want to send to your users. You can send this to any kind of audience, an audience based on a topic, based on analytics data, etc. And you will later get information about how your users engaged with these notifications. If they opened it, how many actually clicked on information in the notification, etc. So a great way to engage with your users. As you can see here, this is an example where we have 3,874 notifications sent. 1,325 of these notifications were opened, and 637 of these notifications were actually an engagement that the user did, actually engaging with that notification. So let's look at the earn part of Firebase that we have. So for earning and monetization of your ads, we have Firebase AdMob by Google. Firebase AdMob allows you to show ads in your app, and these ads can take any number of different formats. For example, video ads, it can be interstitial ads showing an ad across the entire screen, or even native ads where you have the ability to format the ad in a way that you think is good for your app. And there are lots of apps already using this. More than 1 million apps is using AdMob already. And it's completely integrated into the Firebase SDK, so it's easy to use right there, available right now. All right, so that was the growing and the earn part. So I'll hand it over to James to wrap this up.
Thanks, Magnus. So as you've seen, we've walked briefly through how you can develop your app with Firebase. So we have backend services and those services that help you improve your app's quality. We have tools to help you grow your user base, including acquiring and engaging users. And finally, we've integrated with AdMob to help you monetize your app. And that's all tied together with Firebase Analytics, our free and unlimited new analytics product. So we are extremely excited about this. We've been working for 18 months, and we've pulled the best of Google together to help you succeed on mobile. And we're excited to take your questions. So looking forward to hearing them, and don't forget to check us out, firebase.google.com, as I'm sure you probably already have.
Great. Thank you, Magnus, James. So we're starting to see some photos coming in from viewing parties. I'm seeing, let's see, we have one in New York, I think I'm seeing on the screen there. That looks like the New York office. What more do we have? That is Mountain View, I think. And is that also Mountain View, perhaps?
Got some on-brand chairs there.
Yeah, that's right. We also have viewing parties in the Google San Francisco office. I saw one in Vietnam. I don't even know what time it is there, but thank you for sticking with us, guys. We really appreciate it. So if you are at a viewing party, then please also send us your pictures. Put them on Twitter or on Google Plus with the Ask Firebase Live hashtag, and we'll see them and maybe show them here. So let's dig into questions, guys. Yeah, ready? All right, good stuff. So first off, we have 3 video questions, actually. The very first one is from Dan Scott in Sudbury, Canada. Dan, let's roll the video.
Hey, this is Dan Scott from GDG Sudbury in Canada. Big shout out to Francis Ma for using Canadians in his examples in the I/O Firebase overview session. So I build applications on relational databases, typically, and I love the rich data analysis over complex data sets that you can perform with ad hoc queries like joins and scalar and aggregate functions, views, and that sort of thing. But I also understand and am impressed by the performance and real-time synchronization that the Firebase data store offers for applications. So on that note, it seems like there must be some sort of path to the best of both worlds. Can you suggest some best practices for, say, synchronizing a subset of a relational database like Postgres or BigQuery with the Firebase data store so that we can still have those complex data analysis features over a rich data set with the real-time benefits of the Firebase data store? Thanks so much. Appreciate it. And looking forward to your answer.
Oh, so synchronizing relational databases and Firebase. This is actually something that I've been looking at as well. And is there a way to do that, James?
Yeah, so if you want to perform complex relational queries on data that you have in the Firebase database, what we recommend doing is taking the subset of the Firebase database that you care about and synchronizing that out to, we've seen Elasticsearch and Solr and other data stores that are optimized for rich querying, and then you can run your queries on those data stores. And so typically you want to just have a one-way sync to those data stores.
A one-way sync out to them. All right.
Yeah,
Did you have anything to add, Ian?
there's a few options that you can take depending on the kind of problem you're trying to solve. One of the ways that I've seen people do things successfully is actually to write into the real-time database for those real-time features to distribute things out, and then actually have a client of that database that can consume that information and write it into a relational store. Often you'll want to do reporting type queries, which can be heavily joined and might want to go over a long period of time. But the part you're using real-time is actually much smaller. So by having a kind of server instance, you can connect as a client and you can get those updates as they come and write them into your relational DB.
Oh, right. Good stuff. Yeah, I remember I had a talk. Somebody came, where I spoke about Firebase. Somebody came up afterwards and said they're using Firebase not because it's real time, but just because it's so easy to write code to put things in the database. Mm-hmm. And then they were asking about, can I then move it on to another database? But I guess that's what they should do. Good stuff. Thank you. Our next video question is from James Chaw in
Hey James, hey Magnus. So with our apps, we like our content fresh, so using something like Firebase to do that makes it really easy. But there must be some use case where Firebase isn't the best tool to use. Can you describe one of those situations?
I haven't read it yet.
Okay.
All right, up-to-date data. James, is this something you want to take on?
I'm just catching up on the question now. Having up-to-date data is something that is important to many, if not all applications. Is there a use where the Firebase real-time database wouldn't be the answer? So typically, use cases where the Firebase real-time data wouldn't be the answer is where you want to have complex querying. So we've optimized the Firebase database, as Martin was mentioning, for ease of use and for those real-time updates. When we started, it was had a minimal set of querying, and we've been adding to that over time. And as I mentioned in my announcement post last week, we're continuing to work hard on improving the querying set of the real-time database. But if you really need to do like complex joins between multiple tables, then that is not a great use for the real-time database at this point in time.
Great. Thank you, James.
Yeah.
Magnus?
Yeah, sometimes I even think, looking at a database and what to store in a database, I almost feel sometimes that it's not accurate to describe the Firebase real-time database as a database. To a large extent, it's a sharing and collaboration tool across devices, which typically does not exist in a classical database. So it really extends beyond the classical database concept, I think.
Yeah, I think it's so you have a spectrum of data stores, all the way from sort of like a Redis key value store, all the way to like your traditional MySQL, and like Firebase, the real-time database, moves like a little bit. It was a little more powerful than a key value store, but certainly is not a relational database, and it has all of these fantastic notion of shared state, which lets you do things like create Google Docs without a team of Google engineers, or lets you power the notifications widget on Facebook without writing a distributed real-time system.
Right. Yeah. When I talk to people out there in the developer community of what Firebase is, I often have to say, forget what you know about databases. Now we're going to talk about Firebase. It's a slightly different animal, and it does all these cool things that you didn't know a database could do. Yeah. Cool. All right. Thank you, guys. We have one more video question, and this one is from Sheldon McGee in Arizona. Could we roll Sheldon's question, please?
I was looking at the pricing page, and before it said full cloud integration was one of the standard features for the highest price tier. It looks like it was recently renamed to the Google Cloud Platform, and they took out that language altogether. But what does that mean, actually? What does it mean to be integrated with the platform that it all runs on? You would think that would be something that was standard across all of the different price points.
Oh, so a pricing question. Interesting. James, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, we're working hard to really deeply integrate Firebase and Google Cloud. For those of you who have used Google Cloud previously, you'll know that there is no sort of perpetual free tier, whereas Firebase there is. And so the reason that full Google Cloud integration isn't available on anything except our Blaze plan is so that we can align those models. We really think the Google Cloud integration is super powerful. As I mentioned, you have a full cloud platform, and if you've followed any of the Google Cloud stuff that's been going on in the last few months, you'll have heard about all of the amazing stuff they're doing, especially around things like machine learning and vision. And so getting access to those and pairing them with your Firebase app is really, really powerful.
Right, right. You get the best of both worlds there, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and we want to support you across your life cycle. So, whether you're getting started on Firebase and needing to grow into all of the tool set on cloud, or if you're using cloud and want to add a mobile application, we want to make those transitions really easy.
Right. Good stuff. Good stuff. Thank you, James. So now we're on to our Twitter and Google Plus questions. The first one we have is actually speaking of machine learning. Does Firebase have any functionality useful for developers looking to implement machine learning? Who's taking this one?
I think that dovetails really nicely out of the last question.
Right.
So there's a couple of things. One is Cloud ML, Cloud Machine Learning, out of Google Cloud, and then obviously there's Google released TensorFlow as an open source project, which is pretty great. Nothing sort of like directly integrated into the core suite, but you can pick up some great offerings from Google and use them. I'm not sure exactly what you're doing, Matt, but check those out.
Yeah, machine learning is a big area, isn't it? Yeah, Ian.
You could put your TensorFlow models in storage. You could do that
for sure.
Share them in real time. Yeah.
But it's also the case that, there's a lot of power that comes from the cloud, and with Firebase being a very simple way of developing apps, it's kind of helping to integrate these two worlds together. With Firebase now launched, I see the app development process is so much simpler, and that also allows you to more effectively use the services the cloud can offer from your device when you're a developer.
Yeah, I think to like prognosticate slightly, we don't think of certain tasks, for example, like synchronizing data across clients, as difficult anymore. Because you have services like Firebase, real-time database. And looking forward into the future, I think, applications, it will be commonplace that let's take a vision example, I point my camera at an object and I can take a picture and the app knows what that is. And so I think some of these services will get built into a large number of our applications that we as consumers use, and they'll be powered by services like Cloud ML and Cloud Vision and things like that.
Right, right. Yeah, and even in my hobby project, I've seen that pairing with the rest of the cloud is very powerful. I've used, for example, App Engine to just do deep linking and rewriting of URLs and such that is hard to do in Angular, and then together with Angular and Firebase and App Engine, and it all just works beautifully together. All right, thank you. We have another question from social media. If I use, this is Matt Thompson who's asking, if I use analytics or have users create an account with some personal info, do I need a privacy policy on my app?
Yeah, I think the simple answer there is if you're collecting personal information about a user, you should have a privacy policy that states what you're collecting.
Yeah, absolutely, and always you always want to consult with a local council on those kind of things. The laws on what you need to say in those policies are going to vary depending on the region. So it's always best to find out from an expert what you should be saying.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. It seems like a privacy policy seems like the right thing to do, regardless of laws too, right? Yeah. All right. The next question is from Mohammed Kamran, who is asking, Node.js SDK. The Node.js SDK now supports only create token and verify. So how do we do other stuff like access and update database or create user?
So I think what happened here is actually we kind of split things up a little bit when we're pushing the new release out. So the Node.js SDK supports all of the database. We have a separate chunk of the SDK which is focused on creating custom tokens and verifying Firebase tokens. So that's like new, as those features have been developed in this release. But the database SDK is right there. So you can once you've got a authenticated user, you can go off and you can query the database, you can update it, do all that same kind of stuff you could before.
I see. Got it. All right. The next question we have is from Michael Prentice in Florida. Michael is asking, is there an up-to-date guide or blog post for migrating a mean or Node.js/MongoDB app to Firebase? Are there tools for this? Yeah, people often ask me this question as well. What's the official answer?
So, well, I mean, Angular works super well. Angular's
Angular.
been one of the big things for Firebase for a very long time, and it's still something, we've got people on the team very involved with the Angular core team and vice versa. So Angular and Firebase are a really good fit, and then the migration is really your drop-in aspects of that. You don't need the MongoDB, and you don't need Express if you've got these apps. You've got Firebase hosting, you've got Angular. So I think the migration's should be fairly straightforward.
Delete some code.
Yeah, hopefully.
The best kind of refactoring there is, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Angular and Firebase just seem like they're made for each other, right? I write 1 or 2 lines of code and updated what is shown in the browser, what is in the JavaScript model, and what is in the database. It's pretty amazing.
The whole thing is we got this same kind of concept of like listening or binding. It's really the same set of ideas, and it just lets you flow all the way back to the cloud.
We actually coined a phrase. So Angular had two-way binding between the DOM and your JavaScript models. And so we went to ngconf, I guess 2.5 years ago now, and introduced three-way binding, which bound it to a model in the cloud, which was in the real-time database. So when you updated the DOM, it would obviously sync across all clients.
Right.
And so, yeah, Firebase and Angular have been working together for a long time, and are hard at work building and improving the integrations for Angular 2 and the new Firebase 3.x SDKs.
Yeah, actually on that, James, so with the new SDK, the new Firebase SDK, that works with Angular 1.x. Or how is it with Angular 2? Or
there's a matrix of options.
There's a
matrix. You've got Angular. So you got Angular 1 and 2, which are both ongoing projects. Angular 2 is recently launched in ngconf and is going well. We have Angular Fire 1 and Angular Fire 2. to support those two. Both of those at the moment go against the 2.x SDK. So that's where they currently...
The 2.x
Firebase SDK.
Yeah.
So those currently work, and if you have an app using them, you're good. Like, nothing's going to happen to that app. You can keep using it. We're working at the moment to update them to the 3 SDK for Firebase. So that's the new features we launched, and you can follow along. These are open source projects. You can see the pull requests coming in, and feel free to send some as well.
Oh, cool. This is the Angular Fire.
Angular Fire, yeah.
Great. An amazing library. I use it all the time. All right, good stuff. Another question from Michael Prentice in Florida is, how can I define the REST API URI format instead of just taking the Firebase database default URIs?
So the quick answer is I think what you want to do is CNAME them to your own domain. If that is the question you're asking, then unfortunately you can't do that. So it's firebase.io.com is the base of the URI path.
But you can bring your own domain to the hosting. So if you're deploying a web app, you don't have to have that app on like name.firebaseapp.com. You can bring your own domain and have your web app living on there, and then under the hood, it's going to connect to these REST URLs. But those REST URLs are you can't change those.
So okay, I think that's a very important distinction you brought up there, Ian. So the URL that the user sees in the browser is whatever they want it to be, their domain. And then under the hood, the traffic goes to a Firebase URL. Yeah. Got it. Okay, very good. Next question we have is from Trish Wetzel in Silicon Valley. And she's saying, legacy Firebase lists third-party REST wrappers at a URL. Will Firebase bring these in-house and maintain?
So, quick point of contention I have with this: there is no legacy Firebase. There's just one Firebase, and we were obviously upgraded a bunch of pieces and give it a new website. The third-party REST wrappers. Those were always written by the community, and we've been engaged there and really tried to help and facilitate, make those really great, but never taken them on as official libraries. I don't know for sure if we will or not in the future, but interesting suggestion, something we can look into.
Yeah, I think one of the other things is we've had this discussion quite a lot at Google in general on open source projects that are using services that maybe we work on. Sometimes it makes sense for those to be maintained in-house. My preferred situation is actually when we can contribute and we can go and work on the open source project and actually contribute our changes just to whatever you guys are doing, because there's a lot more of you than there are us. And in some cases, it really wouldn't make sense to bring them in-house because we have a certain set of expertise and a certain set of languages we work in, and the community is like an explosion of different languages, different systems, and someone that's bringing a lot of idiomatic knowledge in that language is going to be able to do a better job of building a client around an API than we are much of the time. And so our kind of focus has often been, let's get the APIs standardized and clear and reliable so that we can put that out there and we can document that. And then if the community wants to build on top of it, then we can support them wherever we can.
I really like that, especially as someone who's written client code for Google APIs. I can say that I did an okay job of writing a .NET library for Google API, but once the community took it over, they made it sort of .NET idiomatic, and it sort of worked for .NET developers far better than my initial version. So yeah, who is writing the Angular Fire library?
There's a few people. Gosh, these are Jeff Cross, David East. I'm forgetting people, so apologies to all those people.
I think
there's a big
50,
community.
Yeah,
look at the contributors. It's github.com/Angular/Angular-Fire2. Go click on the contributors. There's a ton of people that have worked on there, and thank you to all of them.
Thank you, as somebody who uses it. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just magic. I put some, I include Angular Fire, and wow, I didn't even realize there were that many people. But I guess that is needed if you're going to get this three-way magic binding. Huh?
Well, it's the core of these things is it's not actually that hard. It's the edge cases and all the details that go into a library like that. Like the 80% cases are usually pretty straightforward, especially when you're dealing with something like the Firebase database is not. If you ever look at the REST API, it's not super complicated.
Right.
If you look at the SDKs, they're not super complicated. Like the majority cases are, I'm going to listen for values coming in, I'm going to push something in, or I'm going to update. These are where you're going to spend most of your time. But once you start getting into the querying and the filtering, you start having to do more work. So to get something working is actually, if you're looking at a language that doesn't have a binding to it, to get something working that likely solves your problem is not a big investment of time. If you want to wrap every single feature, it starts becoming more effort, which is why, the team on Angular Fire 2 and the other bindings, can grow as they're catching these edge cases and building out all these features that the database supports.
Oh, right. Yeah, the edge cases, they'll get you every time, huh? All right, good stuff. We have another question from Sheldon McGee. Wow, lots of questions. Thanks, Sheldon. Another question from Sheldon in Arizona, which is, are Firebase Analytics and Firebase Messaging all new products, or are they renamed and updated versions of previous projects?
So it's a mix. Firebase Analytics is built completely from scratch, just to be a great mobile analytics solution for developers. But then there are other APIs that have existed for some time in Google Play services, for example. App Invite, for example, is one of them. App Indexing, probably people have heard of. So those APIs, since they make a lot of sense for every developer developing an app to engage users, they are an inherent important piece of Firebase. So that's why they've been brought in as features of this entire product.
And we're talking about, for these you described, Magnus, it's not simply rebranding. They are actually integrated now, right?
Exactly. They're tightly integrated. I mean, all of these APIs, I think all is accurate. They integrate with analytics, so you can get analytics data from it. So that's really what Firebase is all about. Rather than having to deal with individual API, look at this from a holistic perspective, a coherent set of features that make sense and that are well integrated when you develop apps. So the work as a developer is as painless as possible.
And when we're talking about developer pain, some of these fit nicely into Android Studio too, right?
Sure. There are plugins now in Android Studio to help with Firebase development. And this is just the initial release after the initial 3 features that existed as part of Firebase. So right now it's grown up to 14 or 15, I think we have there. And now we really have time to focus and improve and incrementally get this product a lot better. So those integrations, all of them will become better as time goes by.
I think Firebase Cloud Messaging that was in the question is a specific one to highlight. So this is Google Cloud Messaging that many of you know and love and sends billions of messages a day, and was rebranded and integrated, as Magnus mentioned, because Firebase is this integrated suite of tools for mobile developers. But second, to really highlight its cross-platform nature. Like, it's not just a push messaging tool for Android. You can send to iOS as well, and we're working with browser vendors to make sure it can send down to the web as well.
Down to the web as well. That's really useful. Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, and I guess it makes sense with analytics being a completely brand new thing, because app analytics on your phone is quite a bit different than web analytics, right?
The needs are different. I think this is the thing with analytics is that you're coming from a world where we have a lot of people who are very good at working with Google Analytics and products with it for understanding how web content is consumed and used and optimized based on that. And GA is an amazing tool for doing that.
Oh yeah.
Firebase Analytics just changed that initial model of going from pages to just going to events, and thinking of it more as a flow where we have all of those events captured, and you can actually really start drilling into the details of them. I think that distinction is relatively small at the actual implementation level, SDK implementation level. If you go and swap out an existing analytics package or add in Firebase Analytics, it's not going to be that much code. This is pretty straightforward, but the implementation of the backend and the processing and the reporting that goes on that is pretty substantial. So it was a big effort to launch that product.
Ah, right, yeah. And I've seen some of these companies, if you have a company that has an app that has a substantial number of installs, you have a lot of data because you're tracking every click basically. Right?
And that was one thing that was important with Firebase Analytics, also free and unlimited, to be able to provide mobile developers with that. So if you haven't looked at Firebase Analytics, I strongly urge the developers out there to take a look.
Yeah, and it's like you can get started with no code.
Yeah.
You can get started just adding the dependency. If you add the Firebase core dependency on Android or iOS, it will just start tracking some basic metrics, app installs and kind of sessions and things like that. So you don't have to go and change your app to give it a try and start seeing whether the data in the dashboard is useful.
Oh, I like that. No code integration.
You're getting us started here, but there's so many capabilities. Yeah, I mean, just the fact that you can use analytics data to build audiences, segment groups, and all of these things ties into other products. James talked about config. Using analytics data, you can build audiences, and that can then feed into config, and you can use config. Using audiences, you can send notifications to just those people that are matching that criteria.
Oh, really?
So there's a lot of integration there that's would be extremely difficult and a lot of work to do if you had to do it from scratch. All of that you get for free when you use Firebase, because all of that stuff is integrated right there.
Oh. Yeah, and there's some cool like edge case integrations and things like that. If you want to say you want to keep Google Analytics for stuff, you're using Google Analytics on the web and you want to have Firebase Analytics, you can use Tag Manager to repeat events over to GA. So you can set it up so that you have Firebase Analytics in your app, and that's automatically feeding into Tag Manager. Tag Manager is going to go and fire those events into our
But Ian, what's Tag Manager?
Smooth. If anyone hasn't encountered Tag Manager is a technology that sort of came from the web world, where you often ended up wanting to have multiple different analytics trackers or conversion trackers for different services, and it lets you effectively just route events. So you're coming in and saying someone's come through and converted on this, you can go and send that to the appropriate trackers on the server side. So you get a really flexible system that you can control even once your app is out there and has been deployed.
Ah, right. I think about Tag Manager. Whenever I hear that, I think about Dan Boran in Chicago, who I think is watching us now. Hi, Dan. Dan always, when Dan and I show up at events, he always gives a talk. He's not a Googler, but he gives a talk on Tag Manager. And then he always, and I asked Dan, what is Tag Manager? And he said, every Googler asks me that, but it's the greatest hidden Google feature that people don't know about, and they should all use it.
Yeah.
So Tag Manager, use it. All right. So our next question is about is feeding Firebase Analytics data to BigQuery only possible on the highest pricing tier, Blaze?
That's true. Yes. And this is one of Blaze has the full cloud integration as part of it, and BigQuery is one of those products in cloud that actually cost money. So it makes a lot of sense to have it together with Blaze.
Yeah, and the BigQuery, for those who haven't heard about what BigQuery is, it's a pretty amazing product.
That's one of the coolest Google products.
Can you do BigQuery?
No, BigQuery is a database product which allows you to do SQL-like statements on petabytes of data. So you can take huge data sets and analyze them using BigQuery in a very rapid and performant way. So it's really for data analytics and looking at big data and all of these things, it is a very unique solution. And analytics, Firebase Analytics, in order to provide more flexibility on analyzing your data, Firebase Analytics has this capability to also provide that data down to BigQuery, so you can write these big custom queries. And that's also a feed that can come from Google Analytics, so you can actually bring in Google Analytics data down to BigQuery as well as Firebase Analytics data. And then you can cross-correlate and look at that.
And a lot of other data sources.
And a lot of other data sources, exactly, because BigQuery can get data feeds from, I guess, most of the cloud products, like cloud storage and other data sources as well.
And a lot of third parties you can integrate with pretty easily. And you just start pulling data sources in, pulling them together, doing queries, and then you can plug that into whatever your kind of BI tools is. If you're using Tableau or something like that, that can talk to BigQuery, and you can do all that.
And it's amazing. I mean, I remember just 10 years ago in projects that I was using 100 million rows in a database table. That was very prohibitive, and we were very scared of implementing a solution like that. With these next generation tools and distribution and the scale of Google, 100 million rows suddenly isn't much data at all. I mean, we're talking terabytes and even up to petabytes in terms of data sets that can be analyzed. This was not possible 10 years ago.
Right, yeah, it is pretty amazing. Let's see, what is it? Mega, giga, tera, peta. Okay, it's big.
Exa.
Exa comes after. Yes, very good. Good stuff. All right, so our next question is from Roberto Martin. He's asking, my apps uses GCM, Google Cloud Messaging. I would like to update to Firebase to use the other services. Is Firebase Cloud Message production ready?
I've got this one. Yes.
All right.
It's a great service. Yeah, like, FCM is built by the team that did GCM, right? This is a new version that they've put together. This is bringing out really just a lot of improvements, but the base layer is still that code that already worked. So there's
so if the previous one worked for you, the new one will.
Yeah, it sends 170 billion messages a day. It's very production ready.
Yeah.
Oh. You forestalled my question. I was going to ask if is anybody using it, but 170 billion messages. I guess somebody is.
One or two.
And as part of the launch of FCM, also we've had a lot of good feedback on simplification, the API improvements. As well.
Yeah, absolutely. The API's got a lot easier to use. There's a lot less, particularly to get started. I think in this case, if you're coming from a GCM integration, it's like if you're using the GCM v3, then coming over to this is a very easy move. But if you're starting from scratch, it's even easier. Like if you're starting from scratch, it's really just you can get this stuff going. I think actually, again, if you're sending notifications from the Firebase notifications console, you can get some of that working with, again, no code. It's just the dependency is going to go in there, and that's going to take care of a lot of that for you. So that's cool, and it's not that we expect everyone who is deploying this stuff to do so with no code. Of course, you're going to want to have notification handling of your own and do things with it, but we want you to spend time writing that code, not to writing kind of boilerplate and things for just receiving those messages in the first place.
Right. Yeah, I think that bears repeating and emphasizing, right? The messaging console, you can go in there on a web page and a non-technical person could put a message in there and send it out to a subset of your users.
Exactly.
And pick which segment even.
Yeah. So it says notification on the left-hand side of the console. That's Firebase notifications, where you can do all of these things. And again, it integrates with Firebase Analytics, so you can build audiences based on your analytics data and then use that audience to target your messages.
Right. Yeah.
And you can schedule and all that kind of stuff. Like there was one of the one of the partners we had a kind of Firebase in the real world session at I/O, which is on YouTube. One of the partners there was talking about how they wanted to do a bunch of campaign type messages, and they didn't want to stay up, and so they can just schedule
stay
them.
Up in the middle of the night.
So they can because they want them to come at a sensible time for each time zone, not at the time they happen to be up. So if they're in Korea and their audience was in the US, then they want to have that go at a sensible time for the US. So little things like that, you just don't have to do that yourself anymore. You can take advantage of this.
Right. Because I've talked to app developers, successful app developers, who wanted to do all this, but they had to build it themselves. And like you were saying, you end up having to build a lot of plumbing when plumbing isn't. You're not a plumber, right? You're a game developer or enterprise developer.
And that's really, a huge value. Building this next level, this in the stack of app development. This is all of these things ready to use. I often say, with Firebase, I could sit down after lunch, and by 5 o'clock, I would understand a lot of the components, see a lot of the components in Firebase that I would use in order to build an effective app. If I didn't have Firebase, I would have to go out and search and look for solutions, and they wouldn't be integrated at all. It would take a lot more time and be a lot more complex than using Firebase.
Right. Yeah, I think wasn't it one of the computing greats like Dijkstra or somebody like that who said that the only advance we've ever had in computing is successive abstraction. Everything else is details. Yeah. Sounds like this is bringing that. Yeah. All right. I think our last question before we go to a break. So this is from Brandon M. Hunter, who's asking, can you share production apps that uses Firebase? Yeah, so do we have some names we can mention of
there's a whole bunch on firebase.google.com/customers that are there. If you're watching some of the I/O talks, you might have seen apps like Ears, Shazam. What else do we have in
NPR?
NPR, yeah.
SeatGeek is using us, Viber, TuneIn. There's a whole bunch, and then these are the partners. We're listing partners and customers that we've been working with in the last 6 months, who have been giving us feedback on all of the great new features. But there's thousands, as you saw, 470,000 developers who were using it prior to last Wednesday. Citrix uses us to power parts of GoToMeeting. CBS uses us to power parts of the social experiences for some of their television shows. Instacart uses us for a whole variety of things, social shopping. Lots and lots of people using it.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point. So you said, James, that we have hundreds of thousands of, as we saw on the graph, using the database component. We know that.
And authentication and hosting.
And authentication and hosting. And some of these partners you mentioned here are ones who have been in the sort of pre-public beta using these new features we're talking about today, messaging and so on. So they are not brand new, raw and experimental. People are using those features, right?
Exactly, yeah. So we've been working on this, for Firebase has been at Google, the acquired company has been at Google for 18 months and have been working hard, and there's been an extensive, what we call early access program, where we go out to trusted partners and trusted customers and say, hey, what do you think of this? And it's always been core to sort of the Firebase philosophy of test and iterate and check out this version of the API. What do you think? How could we improve? And rapidly iterating and getting product managers and engineers, in addition to our developer relations folks, really engaging and interacting and understanding the pain points of our customers. And ultimately that's going to ensure that we're delivering the best platform and the best products.
Right.
And the feedback so far has been fantastic since we launched at Google I/O. It was really so nice to get the initial feedback, and it was really great feedback, and it was very well received, I think.
And that's definitely there's definitely some credit to those partner companies you work with. So if any of them are watching, thank you. It was really good to be able to put this stuff out there and get feedback and have people try it, and then actually get the confidence to launch it in production and be saying, yes, this stuff is working for us. It's making a difference.
And I guess if some of these integrations are no-code integrations, some people have integrated since last Wednesday already, right?
Probably.
All right, good stuff. So it is 4 o'clock here in the Pacific time zone. So this means it's time for us all to take a break. We may need some bio break. Also, this is your chance to take a bio break. It's your chance to keep posting photos of your viewing party at Ask Firebase Live, or to post more questions for our panel. And we will be back in 5 minutes. See you in 5. Hey, welcome back. We're back here. It took a little more than 5 minutes, but I've been drinking a lot of tea today. So we're here. Everybody's back, feeling rested, moved around a bit. Yeah, good stuff. Ready for some more questions, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. So here is a question that I get every single time I speak about Firebase. So I'm really glad it came up, and I didn't have to put my name on this question. And I actually don't know the answer. And Matt Wilson doesn't either. So please let me and Matt know. How are synchronization conflicts dealt with in the real-time database? And particularly when devices go offline. This is tricky, right? If you try to write code yourself for this is tricky. How does Firebase do it?
Yeah, it is tricky. So Firebase has two main ways. Firebase real-time database has two main ways of dealing with synchronization conflicts, and there's two ways to write into the Firebase database. One is a last write wins, and so this is the set method or the update method. And you can call update on a complex object, and it will just update the individual values that have changed. And so if you have multiple clients, whoever gets to the server last, that's the truth. The second way of doing conflict resolution is through a transaction. And so it's a version of optimistic concurrency. And so what you have on the client is you have a mutator function. And so what it does is you pass into that mutator function the current state of the data and what you want to transform it into. And then what it does is it does the transformation, and it sends it up to the server with a hash of the data that it thinks the server has. And if the hashes match, it commits and tells the client, like, hey, you won, like, this is the true value, congratulations. If the hash doesn't match, it'll take the server value, it'll send it back to the client, and it'll rerun the mutator function with that new state that it's got from the server. And it'll keep trying. So if you have, saying you're like incrementing a counter from 1 to 10, and there are 2 people trying to do it, and it says, hey, add 1 to 3, it should be 4, and the server says, no, actually, like, the old value isn't 3, the new value is 4, it'll send it back down, increment, and then keep going. So that's kind of how the two versions of writing to the Firebase database. And what the mutator function gives you kind of a lot of flexibility, because you can put your own custom logic in there to handle whatever edge cases you may need to.
Oh, so I can actually have a counter then, like number of people logged in or something like that, and it deals with it so that 2 people won't try to update it at the same time.
Yep, exactly.
Yep. And then, so let's say I'm writing code, I'm a developer, I'm writing code for this. I want to increase the number of logged in users. I want to increment it by 1 then. And if 2 people were doing it at the same time, what does it look like for me as a programmer? Is there like an exception on my client, or how do I handle it on my client-side code?
So you don't have to do anything. It will keep trying until it succeeds. So it'll just automatically rerun the function until it commits.
Oh, very nice, very nice. All right, I didn't know that. Now I know what to answer when people ask that question. Thank you. All right. Another question we have from Tech with Chance. Nice tag, nice handle. Would you give us a couple of examples of how one could use remote config? Yeah, remote config sounds a little abstract. Could you give us some more concrete example?
Yeah.
Yeah, one example is simply to store, rather than having constants in your app and coding them into class or resource files for Android or iOS, you can have those retrieved from the app towards remote config, so you get those values from the cloud. So if you have data that you may want to change, or you want to try different values of those things, for example, user interface, colors, etc., all of those things can be configured in the cloud, and you can change them in the cloud, and they will have effect in the app as well. This allows you to try different areas to tie in with analytics audiences again. This allows you to try different values for different people, so you can see you can see how the app is being used by different sets of people. So you can try new things out in a dynamic fashion. This is called A/B testing, to see the optimum layout or solution for your app in terms of these configurable values.
Oh, so I can say that today my app has a red background, and then I change, and tomorrow it will be blue, and I don't have to recompile and send it
No
out.
need to recompile or redistribute in any way.
You're smiling.
It's one of those. Like the thing to think about with remote config is stuff like that. You don't really do. Like you don't really end up going, I'm going to change the background color of my app.
Yeah.
You do effectively control features, or you override specific information. So that's roughly the two cases. And I'll give you an example. Like you might have a set of strings in your app, and that are used to display certain things. You might have like a welcome message, right? And you might want to A/B test. Kind of does changing the welcome message make sense? So you would have a welcome message as a default in your app, and then you could run, exactly as Magnus was saying, an A/B test where you say, give some of the users that welcome message, give other users this welcome message. So that allows you to just override a parameter that you've got in your app. The other kind of use is really about...
So, sorry for interrupting you, and I just want to make sure I understand here that, so I could say, have half my audience see Happy Holidays and half of them see Merry Christmas, and then I could actually get analytics broken down by those audiences and see which one works best?
So you would use a analytics user property to do that. Yeah. So the way we kind of suggest it is you'd say holiday greeting, a user property, and then based on what the value was from config, you would set the value of that user property. So you might say, cohort A, cohort B, and so on. Then you could go into analytics, you could filter against that user property, and you could see, I've got a higher uplift in retention for users that got this than got that. And you can have multiple variables. It doesn't mean you don't have to have just one A/B group. You can have as many groups as you need. And you don't have to just have one thing. If you're testing a collection of changes, you can go and put those out. And I think that usage also flips into the kind of other main thing people use remote config for, which is control of features. So you are in a situation where maybe you've added something to your app. Like maybe you've got a game and you've added a real-time multiplayer feature that is very intensive on your backend. You're doing a lot of processing or something like that. It's not an easy feature. You think you're good, but you don't want to just turn this on and then suddenly see all your stuff fall over. So you could control that feature with a variable, which defaults to false and is configured in remote config. Then you could ramp it. So you say, okay, 2% of users have this, 5%, 50%, whatever. And you can also turn it off. So if your game suddenly gets featured in something and is getting absolutely hammered, and that is just causing a really bad experience, you can just disable that. And maybe you can even then send a notification to those people from the notifications console saying, hey, the multiplayer will come back soon. So at least they understand what's going on. Yeah. So those are really the two areas that people use remote config for.
Yeah.
Oh, so this sounds like stuff that people have been doing on the web, and I've heard developers say this. They've been doing this sort of thing on the web for some years, but they found it until now, I guess, very hard to do it in the mobile app world. But now they can test which picture converts the best, which message. Should I try? It's free shipping, $50. If the order is $50 or more, no, I'll change my mind, $40 instead. Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, and you can have default values as well. So in case you have a network disruption, you can't connect to the cloud. Remote config API, the client-side API, can return default values. So you can assure that the app is working at all times.
Yeah, and realistically, if you're looking at implement it with defaults. So it can be tempting to think of remote config as like, I'll go in and put every single variable into the console. But what you probably want is to actually launch your app with nothing in the console. You have everything at launch time is in the defaults. And only when you want to override one of those variables for all or some subset of your audience do you actually go and set up an entry in the console for them. So it's slightly different than you might expect. If you do have a situation where you're like, but I actually want all this data only to live in the cloud, you probably want to use the database. Because the information's there, it's going to be synced real time. That's probably the right choice. If you're looking to do overrides, remote config, it gives you that flexibility there.
Are there concerns, or should I think about performance with remote config? It's okay to put it in some places in my app, but not in others.
Remote config's actually pretty much always going to run locally. So there's a local cache on the device that is where the values will be run from. It's going to go and do an asynchronous fetch for that data. So you're never going to be stuck waiting for this thing to happen, other than from that very initial file read of local device.
Oh, really? Okay.
And it uses Firebase Cloud Messaging to actually do the transport, which has been optimized for battery efficiency and reliability. So.
Oh, nice. Nice. Yeah.
That's a good point.
Good stuff. All right. Next we have Alan Furstenberg from New York, who is asking, can Firebase notifications be sent via an API or just via the console? We talked about the console before and how easy it was, but and also, is there an API for most console operations?
I'm sure Alan asked me this question in person as well.
Has the answer changed?
No, it hasn't. So Firebase notifications is really what we're thinking is for the UI and the console. So the ability to go in and schedule messages and send them. The Firebase Cloud Messaging has an API. So you can do those things. You can go in and send messages. You can send to topics. You can do that same functionality via an API. But in our sort of minds, that's part of the Firebase Cloud Messaging thing. In terms of the APIs, it depends with the product. Like obviously, database has a very complete RESTful API, and you can use that. Not everything does at the moment, and it's something that we're looking at based on where people are going and what the demand is for each product.
So with the cloud messaging, would most developers use the console to enter their messages there? Would most write an app or local code for it? What do you think?
It all depends on, if you actually have a message, you know that a human will decide and write this message, and then the console makes a lot of sense because you can go in as a human and do that. Let's say you have data in a backend database, and that backend data drives whether a message should be sent or not. That's more an automated process, and in that case it makes a lot of sense to program that using FCM instead.
Oh, right, like your account is about to expire or something
Correct,
like that.
exactly.
Yeah. Then you need to send it, to very surgically to one person at a time.
Yeah, I think the FCM team refer to it as like transactional notifications, which are, a thing has happened, so do this thing. Versus a engagement notification, which is like, hey, do you want to know about this thing? So you might want to send out manually a message to tell people, oh, there's a new sticker pack available in your app. That's reasonable, and you want to choose when to do that because you're doing it about the audience. Everyone in this country gets a sticker pack at the same time. I want to send it at a time they're awake and using their phones. But the transactional notification, I might want to send it right away. If it's like, oh, you've received a new message, I can send that right away. So for those kind of things, you're likely to use the API.
And really, the split between Firebase Cloud Messaging and Firebase Notifications is, as Ian described, like transactional versus marketing or campaigns. And we really thought about it in terms of who is the persona within your organization who will be sending these. And typically, the developer will be wiring up transactional push notifications, which will be done through an API, and your marketing or your growth hackers or whoever you have who's saying, hey, this user is about to churn, I haven't seen them in 30 days, let's send a push notification, or let's send a notification to that audience, and that'll really be done through the console.
Oh, I see. Different personas. Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it. Yeah. All right, good stuff. Our next question is from Josh Wilson, who is asking, how long did you guys spend putting together the Firebase puzzle? That was a lot of fun. I have actually heard many developers tell me that this was a lot of... Not very easy, but a lot of fun, this Firebase puzzle.
So
Everybody's looking at you, James.
I will take that one. It took us a while. We did have some help from outside of Google. We knew it was something we wanted to do, but as you can imagine, it was a bit of a crunch coming up to I/O.
To I/O, yes.
So there was many of us who sat down and tested it and gave feedback and guidance and really helped tweak. And if you don't know what this is, you should go to firebase.foo. So what we have, for those of you who don't know, there's a rogue fish on the loose, and it's disrupting one of the Firebase developers' apps. And so if you catch the fish through solving a series of kind of puzzles, you get a free ticket to Google I/O 2017.
Ooh.
So that's a pretty big.
Nice.
Those are like gold dust. So there's 100 of them. I think people out of yesterday started solving it, and so but I still think there's a lot of I/O 2017 tickets left. So go to firebase.foo and see if you can solve it.
All right, good stuff. Yeah, a developer I had lunch with just the other day said that damn puzzle, one more day I didn't get any work done on my regular job, but it was so much fun.
There's a lot of threads on Reddit about it, and it's been really cool to see the reaction.
Ah, cool. So again, James, sorry, the URL was Firebase?
Firebase.foo.
Firebase.foo, so...
FOO.
Okay, firebase.foo. Still tickets and prices out there. Cool. All right. This is an interesting one. All my data, question from social media, all my data must be stored, hosted in my country, which is not the US. Maybe we hear a lot about this from European developers. Therefore, I cannot use Firebase. Is there any way to solve this problem?
So the Firebase real-time database and Firebase storage currently are, and Firebase hosting as well, the servers ultimately where the data is located is in the United States, as the person asking the question points out. This is something we are working quickly on, so hang tight, and we will have an answer to this.
Oh, cool. Sounds like we may have to have you guys back and we'll pick this question up again.
Yeah.
All right. We have another social media question. JWAM is asking, what is a sane strategy when deploying a new app version requiring new random Firebase data formats, but evidently having multiple app versions active in the wild? Right, so I've seen this with my game also. It's only a little hobby project, but I'm deploying a new version of the game, and all of a sudden I have, like, my score is in a different place in the object hierarchy, or my score is now called something different, and now I have multiple versions of the app. Some are assume the sort of old schema, some assume the new schema. How do you deal with that?
So there's a lot of different techniques depending on the exact problem.
Mm-hmm.
One of the actual changes I think we made in this SDK release was for the database, for example. If you're doing the marshalling into objects, we actually will ignore extra parameters by default. So if you add a parameter, that is safe. That's a configurable thing. You can go and change it with an annotation on the class, but that will then be a safe addition. The real answer is to define that strategy kind of upfront. You have to choose, how am I going to deal with changes to this data structure? Because some of the stuff, if you remove a field which a version of the app is depending on, that's very difficult. There's very few ways you can deal with that if you haven't kind of allowed for the possibility ahead of time. So some of the things you can do are, try and add fields instead of doing anything else. Try and tag your data structures with versions if you think they are likely to churn, and then you can actually check for that and maybe choose to, this is a newer data structure. Just say, hey, sorry, please go and get the new version of the app. If that's something where you just can't handle it, your app's too old. Again, you can take advantage of these other tools that we've got in Firebase. So you can go and send a notification to users on the older version, try and prompt them to upgrade, maybe offer them some kind of an incentive. You can offer them some in-game currency or something like that. Hey, get the latest version. And you can use remote config to disable features. So one of the things I would really suggest doing with remote config is, for big blocks of feature, see if you can put it in remote config in a way that you can turn it off. Because that then gives you the flexibility of, oh, I'm now 3 versions later, I want to do an upgrade here. Actually, on the version, this old version, there's just no way to support it. I can actually feature flag that off for that version, and I know that users are gonna, they won't see anything there, they'll see that feature isn't available, and hopefully come through and upgrade, but they're not gonna get crashes. I'm not gonna get people having a really bad experience with inconsistent data. So if you have any...
No, that's great. I think schema migration it's a problem, an issue that you have with many databases, for all databases, and
all data.
I think there's a lot of literature out there on how to do schema migration as well.
Right, yeah. All right, good stuff. Our next question is from Awaz Giavali. Sorry if I didn't got the pronunciation right. What is the difference in core library and analytics library in Android?
Not a lot. So the core library is actually almost a virtual target. So it depends on the analytics library. There's a couple of other dependencies that come in, like there's the Firebase Common and Play Services Base, and just some other utility libraries that don't really, you don't use it directly in your application code. So there, at the moment, core and analytics are the same thing. We wanted core because as we move forward, we want to be able to have a place that you can know is reliably going to give you the core experience of Firebase, which is at heart right now analytics. But it is kind of confusing for people who are looking for an analytics dependency. So all of the actual code for that lives in the analytics split. So it doesn't add any weight to your app. You can choose either one of them. We recommend core so that it's kind of, you're getting the base Firebase experience.
I see.
And the same is true on iOS. If you go and look at that, there's a sub-spec Firebase Core, which depends on Firebase Analytics.
So use core.
Use core.
Is what? Use core.
That's what we're going with.
All right. Good stuff. We'll go with that. Our next question is from Thiago Junior Alves, who's asking, are the defaults for remote config updated from the server when the app is offline, or does it revert back to the defaults?
It updates locally a cache. So the app ships with defaults, and then when it fetches new ones from the server, those are going to live there until they expire. So when you can do a fetch, you can actually give it an expiry time. And once it expires, if there's no new ones from the server, it'll go back to the defaults. So it's kind of largely in your control how you deal with the state of where you've got config data that's old. For some things, you might want to go, this should be a long-lived bit of configuration. For other things, you go, hey, if I haven't fetched an updated value in a while, just revert to the default.
Oh, so you can set the expiration yourself.
The expiration, yeah.
Oh, well, that's nice. All right, good stuff. All right. Yeah, Dren is asking, is the new Firebase console not allow project name? Oh, doesn't the new Firebase console allow project names shorter than 4 characters, and not allow to customize a prefix domain name like abcd.firebaseapp.com?
I believe this was directly implemented to prevent me from having ian.firebaseapp.com.
Sorry, Ian. I apologize. No, so that is one of the constraints we have. And yes, the project you choose assumes or parlays into the subdomain that you have for Firebase hosting. So that's the short answer there. There are some reserved prefixes, for example, like you can't have something that begins with Firebase. There are also some illegal characters.
Mhm.
I won't name them all now because I can't remember them. But, I think like the $sign and the period or full stop if you're in a non-US country.
I run into most of those when I bugs in my code try to create keys with those, and it's not happy then. Oh, right. Oh, so here's a question that I actually have. Well, to be honest, I didn't realize I had this question until I read it on here. I realized that, like Xichao Zhu, I am not separating my production analytics data from my sort of QA builds and my developer versions and my various other sort of in-house builds. So in my analytics, all data from all the test versions and production, everything feeds into that one place, which I now realize is not very smart. So Xichao Zhu is asking how to separate that, the QA builds, the analytics data coming in from QA builds.
Different projects.
Yeah, I mean that's one option. Yeah. It's legitimate. You can create another project and just associate that with your QA options. You can do it in one though. If you want, there's the way to differentiate stuff in analytics is with a user property. And so you could have a version user property or a mode user property and set it to a value, but you're limited to only 25 user properties. But version is one of the user properties you get magically for free. So if you can, what I've kind of seen people do is like have version x.x-dev, x.x-qa, and then you can start filtering on that.
Ah, good stuff. And as a follow-up to that, when I am writing my new version of the app that has a slightly different schema then, and I'm testing it and so on before I rolled it out, do I use the a remote config to point to a different Firebase database, or how do I end up not putting QA data in my production Firebase database?
Yeah, you could. Again, that's one of those questions where a lot of it's up to your specific needs. Yeah. You can have another database, have another project, and use that one for QA. That works. You could also structure your database so that there is separate kind of routes for different environments, so that you write into a different one of those and just change out where you get your root ref. Instead of having it as root, you have root / prod or root / version, or however you want to structure that kind of stuff. But yeah, multiple projects is a totally reasonable choice.
Yeah, because then you have an absolute clear separation. There is no question whatsoever.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're QAing your app and you're sitting there in remote config and you're configuring key value things. And the last thing you want to do is affect all your production users while you really want to test your remote config for the QA version of your app. So you always have to juggle around with all of these things if you have the same project for these things. So really, to get a clear demarc between test environments and production environments, using different projects is the best thing.
And just for some background knowledge, for those of you who might be curious, a project is a container that can house multiple applications and has a set of shared resources. So here we're talking about the database, but within a project you can have, say, your Android app and your iOS app and your web app, and there are specific characteristics, say crash reporting, that you don't want shared. You just want to know about specific crashes on my iOS app, and so that's specific to like the app level as opposed to the project level. Just as some background.
But you're saying, James, my Android app and my iOS app might, for example, write to the same database.
So every project has a shared database.
Every project has a shared database.
Yeah, you'd want those in the same project. You generally want your apps all in the same project. If you're splitting out, your QA from your dev versions, you might have 3 projects, each of which has your Android app and your iOS app and your web app in it.
And same thing with analytics. You want to share analytics data across Android and iOS and web as well. So.
Oh, right. So you can see all the clicks in the apps.
So you see, regardless of whether it's an Android app or iOS app, you share the same analytics store for that project.
You get different views of it, though.
Yeah, you
Yes.
do.
Yes.
So you get different views.
Yeah. So when you go down on the we have a slide, don't we? Shall we use the slide? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Could we?
Can we get to the slides?
Yeah.
Actually, go back to the previous one.
Show this the slide from Magnus' laptop, please.
So this screen is like what you get when you've got a few apps connected.
Yeah.
This is from a real game, and you can see there's little Android icons because there's a couple of Android variants. There's little iOS icons. Now, those are grouped effectively by package name or bundle ID, but they could represent. You could have, Comrade Hot Labs, Bingo, Dev, and QA, or whatever versions in there. That's entirely up to you. And then if you go to the next slide. Once you click in, you see up in the top right there, it says iOS has Red Hot Labs Bingo. That is for this app, it's analytics. So we're in the project. They all share the same project, but we're looking at a view of just the analytics for the iOS app. And you can go and see all your active users and engagement and all that kind of good stuff.
Really good stuff, yeah. So this is on the project level.
Yeah, so the analytics, the whole dashboard is on the project level, the whole console. And then within that, you get a drop down for each of the apps. So you can see the analytics for that.
Ah, right. Got it. Okay, great. Thank you for showing us, Magnus. All right. So next question we have is Timur Kalmatui, who is asking, what is the best approach to move from SQL-based database and RESTful API to the Firebase real-time database? Any tips? Yeah, I struggled a bit with this too. It's a different way of thinking with a real-time database, right?
Mm-hmm. So it is a different way of thinking, and there's two major differences. First of all is the request response nature. Typically people think about reading to a database or writing to a database and then reading from it. And second is like the client server notion. So let's take those one by one. So the request response, Firebase has, instead of read and write, it has a write and listen for changes. So the Firebase real-time database notifies you when data has changed, and so you have a callback and you subscribe to a location within the database. So a little bit of a different mindset there. And then second is we have very thick client libraries. And so one of the beautiful things about the Firebase real-time database is you don't need a server. You can certainly access the database from we have a Java library and a Node library and obviously a REST API, so you can get at it from wherever you do HTTP. But that's not the recommended way of doing it. If you use the client's libraries for iOS, Android, and the web, you get things like offline mode, where your app remains responsive when you don't have an internet connection. You get things like transactions that we were talking about earlier. Those don't come over the REST API. And so we definitely recommend that you use those libraries. And then third is the data model. So in SQL database, you have tables and you have primary keys and foreign keys, and the Firebase real-time database is just a large document. It's a large JSON object of pretty much arbitrary granularity. And so the transition between the two, there is sort of the migration story is really think about how your data structure needs to change, and it will require a pretty massive code change. So I recommend going to firebase.google.com/docs and checking out the documentation for the database.
And there is, exactly, so it's not possible to find a 1-1 automatic translation script between these two environments. My personal suggestion is really start to play around with the Firebase database to get familiarized with it, because it takes a little bit of time before you get a feel for what the structure is like, etc. And it's a lot of fun as well, because you get started so quickly. And then once you've done that, you kind of start to get the feel for how to map your traditional SQL environment over to this kind of methodology instead. There's also a document on Firebase in the documentation called Structuring Data, which is a great introduction to how data is structured. The preferred way of doing it is Firebase.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I did exactly what you were saying, Magnus. I started playing around with it, and the first 2 days I was playing with it, I was like, Okay, now I need to check if this name is already taken. Okay, I'm going to hit the database and see if this... No, wait a minute. That's not how it works. I already have all the names, and if any new name is added, I will have gotten the update already. So I have it locally. Boom. So it was much easier, but it took a bit of a change.
Yeah. But when you actually start to think about all of the things that are going on in the background, that's why I was coming to this database. It's really like a real-time, multi-node event collaboration technology. There is the database piece to it, but I mean, the additional value that's being created by Firebase is to be able to create these multi-node apps that can collaborate and share data in real time. It's quite amazing, I think. That was the thing that hit me in the beginning. I come very much from a SQL background, and all of this, I need to pull the database, I need to see if something changes, or I need to build a network layer on top of the database, or I need to have a trigger that fires off this and then sends some request to my server that can update. I mean, the amount of logic that you explicitly program to create these environments, if you didn't have the Firebase database, is so big and so complex. And Firebase, you don't even host the actual system that keeps the data. You just refer to it by URL, and it's all automatically hosted, and it's just working. It's amazing, I think.
Most applications are just a series of state changes, and the Firebase real-time database provides you with those state changes.
Yeah, that's right. I think
perhaps I'm being a bit enthusiastic here, but I'm really speaking. I'm really speaking from my heart of using this. I'm not trying to sell this to people. This is actually, for me, it was a big eye-opener to start to use this API.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I started to break out in a bit of a rash here when you mentioned database triggers, and I'm feeling very uncomfortable now. Let's not talk about triggers anymore, okay? I've seen so many bugs caused by database triggers. It's good when state changes are handled for you automatically. Yeah. All right. Next question we have is from Joseph, who's asking how to do email verification with authentication on Android. I'm concerned about imposters.
I'll take that one.
Yeah.
So one of the exciting new features in the announcement last week is email verification. So you can, before Firebase Auth had password reset, and we've added email verification as of last Wednesday. So it's in the Firebase console under the Auth tab, and if you go into the Auth tab, the last top tab has all of your email templates in there. So there's password resets, and there's email verification, and I think there's one or two others actually. And so you can go in there and you can customize it to your heart's content, whatever text you want to put in there, and we'll provide a URL that a user can click and can hit and verify their email.
And just to back up and explain what this feature is, this is the feature where, or maybe James, you could describe the user experience as they go through the flow?
Yeah, so this is, if you've ever signed up for, pick your SaaS provider here, what it'll say is, great, you've signed up, please go and check your email and verify your email. And you'll go over to your email provider and it'll say, thank you for signing up, please click this link to confirm. And there's a bunch of security benefits to doing this. One, ensuring that if you're actually using your email for your username, that is actually your username or your email, and so you'll click that link and it'll say verified, and then it'll let you go ahead and use the application.
So this is a piece of code that I've written many times. I think once for every app. So I don't need to write code to have this in my Firebase.
Correct. This is all out of the box.
Nice. I didn't know that. Oh. Cool. Thank you, James.
I was gonna say, because I see the giant hook coming out. We've got no more questions coming up. But there was one that came out on Twitter just at the end, which was what's the best way for people to stay up to date other than just staying on a hangout with us for the rest of time, which I think is probably not
would
gonna
be
scale.
pretty
It's not gonna
awesome.
scale.
Yeah, it's not going to scale.
Well, James, what's your preferred choice?
My preferred choice of how to stay in touch with us. So there's a few channels you have. First of all, I'd recommend Twitter. So we're just at Firebase on Twitter. Super active there, and you'll get links to the latest releases and blog posts that we put off, and events that we'll be attending. So that's a really great one. If you're looking for something more interactive and you want to chat with the team, we have our mailing list. So it's groups.google.com/firebase-talk. And you can go in there, and if you want to share with the community something that you've built using Firebase, or if you're looking for some feedback or something like that, you're more than welcome to join. We've built a really robust community and a passionate community there, and we'd love to have you be a part of that. The third way, if you have a technical question, so if you have a question on implementation or something that involves code, Stack Overflow is the place you want to go. So we've got a lot of the team members who are active there, and again, we have a fantastic community. So if you want to up your Stack Overflow rep, please help out there as well. That'd be fantastic. As Ian mentioned, some things don't scale, so do love your help where possible. You're welcome to participate on GitHub. We've got a lot of open source projects, AngularFire 2, and we've got one called GeoFire to help you deal with geolocation in your applications.
Firebase UI.
Yep, Firebase UI. So we've got Firebase UI is
New job dispatcher. That's in there. That's pretty badass.
Lots of good stuff. And then
blog.
And then the final way is the blog. Yeah.
The blog. Where does the blog live?
So firebase.google.com/blog, or that's the quickest way. Firebase.google.com/blog.
Good stuff. Lots of resources. Good stuff. Are Magnus, Ian, are either of you on responding to questions on Stack Overflow?
Yep. Yeah.
I think
you
I remember reading one of your
and
questions.
you'll see a lot of the team. If you see names like Puff and Abe and Kato, myself, there's a whole bunch of the Firebase DevRel team that are on there. Coding Doug, he's on there quite a bit. You're gonna see a lot of people on there, and we're always happy to answer questions. But as James says, we're even happier to upvote your answers. So we like that.
And really interacting with the community is one of the things that is sort of imbued in the culture. And as we talked about earlier, this test and iterate. We are going to build a better product by getting your input and your feedback. And it's been fantastic to hear some of the questions and feature requests come through here today. But we'd love more of those. So if you actually go to firebase.google.com and you click support up on the top, you can actually submit feature requests there. And as we go through the product road mapping process, those get taken into account. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. And obviously, participate in the different channels. And we're excited to hear what you've built.
Yeah, that support place is really worth knowing about. You can send feature requests and bugs there, and you can also get troubleshooting support, and that's not going to a black hole. We have a team, some here, we have a team in Manila, and they are responding to it all through the day, and they've done a fantastic job. So if you have a problem, they're going to be a great place to go.
And in that page, you can also see the other reference like Stack Overflow and the groups, etc.
Oh, okay. So the one-stop shop is firebase.google.com/support.
Yeah. Then you'll see all the.
And there's you see. Very.
That's
good.
the quick answer. That's where we should have started.
Sorry. No, this is good. This is good. And I'm happy you guys told me about all these new features, or I would have been in there clicking on support, asking you to, can you add email notification? And it's already in there. I've learned a lot here, guys. Thank you very much, Ian, Magnus, James. A lot of cool features that I'm going to implement in my game, and it'll be great fun. And thank you very much for posting all your great questions to us. We really enjoyed doing this interactively with you. And so these new Firebase tools, as we heard, are available as of last week, and you can get a head start on your competition by going to firebase.google.com and start using the tools today. Also, be on the lookout this fall for local Firebase events in your local community run by Google developer groups. in the summer and in the fall, they will run Firebase-themed events. Thank you for joining us. And remember, you developers are building the future. That is an awesome responsibility. And we can't wait to see what you build. Thank you.